Well, no doubt this is the definition of a bounce-back week for Penn State.
You know, we critique because you, the viewer and Penn State fan, care. Well, we have a lot to critique this particular week.
And we got a game to look forward to this week. And let's see if Nittany Lions can come back and get it done on the road in Indiana, which may surprise you. We'll look at the numbers later. It's not as easy a place to play as you think.
Blue White Tailgate's next. And we welcome everyone to the Blue White Tailgate. Steve, Jay, Todd, Josh Sperber coming up a little bit later with Gerry DiNardo in the show. We'll also take a trip into the film room. We'll take a look at Titanic. No, it's just
That's not the title we want this week.
No, I don't think so. But a lot to talk about, obviously looking back on Michigan State, and we'll also take a look at Indiana coming up. Look, obviously not the performance anybody in that stadium wanted unless you're wearing green.
It's really strange because we're talking so many games in a row. The offense has just been so fantastic, and it's the offense that we're looking at and going, what happened? I mean, it wasn't just late game stuff. It was really throughout the whole game. It was unusually ineffective on the offensive side of the ball.
Well, I think one of the things that jumped out at me Saturday watching it was how effectively, outside of the Miles Sanders touchdown run, for the most part, the first Michigan State guy that got to the ball carrier, got him down, or held him up to a second guy together, they tackled really, really well and rallied the ball, and that created some problems for Penn State.
Well, for James Franklin, he says, look, if you're a boxer, you put a team on the ropes, left hook, knock them out. Team didn't do that.
We had a chance to put away a proud program and a good program and a very good football coach. We had a chance to put them away several times on offense, on defense, and on special teams, and we didn't do it. We let them stay in the game. Let them stay in the game.
And that's the worst thing you can do when you're the favorite, they're the underdog. You let them hang around, Jay. The longer they hang around, the more confident they get.
Well, the funny thing is watching the game on Saturday, one of the things I kept looking at is I kept watching the TV monitor to see how Michigan State's sideline was doing, and they never panicked, and they were really, you felt like they had the game kind of going in the tempo they wanted, that they were comfortable with almost the whole game.
Well, over 18 minutes of time of possession in the first half. Penn State did score twice. There was a 5-play and a 4-play drive, so when they did score, they even gave the ball back quickly. So for Michigan State to hang around in the game, as you mentioned, Jay, and to kind of wear down the defense and get that time of possession, that's what they were looking for.
All right, so let's get to the update desk. The update desk brought to you by PSECU. Josh, what do you have?
Here is your pregame update, sponsored by PSECU. It was a tough loss for Penn State last week, but still some milestones achieved on the offensive side of the ball. Starting under center with Trace McSorley, who became the all-time leading passer in Penn State history, passing Christian Hackenberg with 6-yard toss to Pat Fryermuth in the first quarter. He's on pace to become the first Penn State QB with 9,000 career passing yards. Also in the first quarter against Michigan State, Miles Sanders became the 45th Penn State running back with over 1,000 yards rushing. He's now 43rd on the Nittany Lion all-time rush list. As for some injury news heading into Indiana, Fred Hansard, the redshirt freshman defensive tackle, is now out for the season. As usual, Franklin wouldn't elaborate on his injury, but he did undergo surgery and will not be returning for the Nittany Lions this season. Guys, back to you.
Well, the first thing I notice about that report is the coat Josh is wearing. It's that time of the year. Jeez, Josh, trying to stay warm over there. Let's take a look at the series between Penn State and Indiana. You're going to see how lopsided it is between the two. But, I'll be honest, Todd, I think, especially defensively, I think they've played Penn State as well as anybody the last couple of years defensively.
There's been some interesting game, and you see the one at Memorial Stadium, 8-1 Penn State. They lost there fairly recently. They have played them tough. I don't know. I think Penn State's catching Indiana at a good time. I think the Hoosiers could really use a bye week. They've had a pretty rough stretch to go, and Penn State's going to be certainly motivated to hit the road.
And you talk about hitting the road, Todd. That's what Koa Farmer talked about. He said the ability to come together on the road when it's, quote, us against them.
I think when we play away games and we're on the road and we're against, it's like 100, Coach Franklin always says, it's 125 guys silencing however their stadium fits. I think that's good. I think that's when we really come together. You know, we look each other in the eyes, and we always say road dogs. You know, and when we go to Indiana, I think that's what's going to get done. Is we're gonna come together. We're gonna look each other in the eye. We're gonna depend on one another and get a W.
Jay, is there something to that going on the road?
Absolutely, especially when the natives are a little restless as they are. I mean, it's nice to get away from the natives sometimes. But believe me, there's been some times like, thank God we're playing this one on the road, so we don't have to hear anything. Our players can gotta just focus and lean on each other. There's a lot of truth to that.
Well, Todd mentioned the offense in the opening segment here, and we're going to zero in on that and talk about that coming up as we continue with the Blue White Tailgate. Hear from James Franklin along the way as well. We'll also hear from Trace McSorley as we continue with more after this. All right, welcome back. Let's talk about the offense. I think, Todd, you put it succinctly. That's the one thing I think nobody expected to have a 17-point performance. That's not this team.
Should have done the research. How many times have we seen just 3 points after halftime, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's really tremendous that they held them that way. And look, we start to talk about how ineffective Penn State's offense was, but Jay, you started to give credit to the Spartans' defense, and rightfully so. I mean, they really, really tackled well. And the other thing that they did was they spied Trace McSorley exceptionally well. He was not able to get out and move the chains. There was a lot of 3-and-outs, 4-and-outs because Trace with his feet just couldn't get to the chains. And, you know, his longest run was 10 yards for the entire game after running all over Ohio State. His longest run was 10 yards. Did a good job.
And Ohio State spied him. I mean, Malik Harrison, number 39, was the spy in that game, and Trace kept beating him. He couldn't beat the spy. And also, I thought they made the pocket claustrophobic at times. They may not have sacked him, but they pushed it in.
Yeah, they got a lot of movement from the inside guys. And one of the things you talk about the spy that was a little unique for them, there's a couple of times they went to a 3-man rush and had 2 linebackers spying them, and the one would kind of peel off with the back, and the other guy was there. So they really made some great adjustments and did nice things. And I think they frustrated them a little bit.
Earlier in the year, he did not run for a lot of yards against Pitt. Well, guess who Pitt's head coach is? Pat Narduzzi, defensive coordinator. And Mark D'Antonio was asked in this week's press conference, did you talk with Pat Narduzzi? He's like, of course we did.
You'd blame him if he didn't.
Yep.
Time now for the Blaze Alexander Offensive Player of the Week, brought to you by our good friends at the Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships. And with a 162-yard performance, it is Miles Sanders. He broke off the longest run of his career in this game, a 78-yard run that set up a touchdown. There he is taking off, traversing all 78 yards to get it down to the 5-yard line. Then Trace McSorley hit K.J. Hamler on a touchdown pass. And then on a draw play, he was able to break off a 48-yard touchdown run, all against a defense that you take away the big runs in this game. They showed why they're number 1 in the nation against the run.
No question, and it tells you how strong a run that was by Miles Sanders, that he was able to break as many tackles as he did. And that was the one time that really Michigan State couldn't get a guy to the ground.
That was a tremendous run. And, you know, Saquon Barkley was in the building and maybe, you know, had some motivation there. That was just a phenomenal run by Miles Sanders.
What about 4-minute offense, Todd? That's something that James Franklin has talked about, preached about. We saw the evidence of it in the Fiesta Bowl. I mean, they handled it really well. What did you think?
Yeah, we talked about the growth of the 4-minute offense. As last year they lost 2 games back-to-back, Ohio State and Michigan State. And then the Fiesta Bowl, they finished that game and ran the clock out against the Huskies. And I think for this game, when you watch it, and look, the offense was ineffective for most of it, but 1 first down at the end of the game, and you can finish off the Spartans, and they didn't. And I think that's the most frustrating part for people as they watch it. So I asked Trace McSorley after the game, what are you guys talking about during the week? What are you talking about on the sidelines during the game? About whether or not to throw the ball, whether or not to run the ball, and here's how he answered the question.
Everyone's on the same page. Everyone knows what we're trying to do. I mean, the biggest thing is, you know, for us, we can't lose our identity, and you know, we got to go win the game. And if that means we got to throw we got to throw. If that means we got to run the ball and burn the clock out, that's what we got to do. You know, tonight like I said, we had, you know, one opportunity that was close to that 4-minute situation, probably a little bit outside of that, but we still could have gone down, got points, and made a difference.
And he talked about the last possession needing just the 1 first down. It's 2018, right? You got to adapt. You can't continue to put the pressure on your defense. 1 first down ends the game. First downs burn timeouts and the clock, not just running the ball. And they got to figure out a way to get those last first downs to finish the clock.
All right, let's get to our drive of the week, by the way, the drive of the game. Coming up for Penn State in this one and Michigan State. And Here is the drive of the game. 3 plays, 7 yards. This is the drive you're talking about, Todd. This amplifies what's happening.
Well,
there.
here's the second down play. I mean, it's a sample part of the sequence. And look at the flow in Michigan State. I mean, they're overplaying that run. And then, Jay, you mentioned he went out of bounds on this one, and Juwan Johnson didn't get that block. But, you know, he's trying to get those yards because he knows he can end the game with a first down.
No question.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get to now. Josh says that with 6 games remaining, there's a lot to play for.
Despite another heartbreaking loss against a Big Ten opponent, James Franklin still has a positive outlook and a lot of belief in this team.
Losses are tough, and I agonize over them as much as anybody, and I know our fans do as well because they're invested. But I also know that I sleep well at night knowing that our program has grown dramatically over the last 5 years. Is it where we want it to be right now? No. Is it where anybody wants us to be exactly right now? No. But I know we're headed in the right direction.
Penn State is certainly coming together as a program, but there's still a lot more that needs to be done on the field to take that next step after 2 close losses in a row.
We got to come together, and we got to be stronger than ever right now, and we got to fight for everything that we're going to get, you know, in the Big Ten, or, you know, no one cares what you're ranked. You know, you're going to have to come in, you got to earn everything. And, you know, today we didn't earn that opportunity, and we got to earn it every single day from Sunday all the way through Saturday.
Despite the setbacks in these last 2 games, there's still a lot of belief that this team can get back on track and turn the season around. Guys, back to you.
All right, Josh. And Jay, a couple things right away with this team, because each team is different, takes on its own personality. In this transition right now, a couple more playmakers would help. More depth is needed.
Oh, no question. I think, look, the reality is this. It's a young team. And everybody seemed to forget that after 2 or 3 weeks. And, hey, it's a young team. You got young linebackers. You got a lot of guys to replace. And so this reality, at the beginning of the year, this team was going to lose some football games, most likely, unless some things just bounce the right way. And you know what? The next 4 weeks are not going to be any picnic either. You go to Indiana. You got Iowa's playing really, really well. So you know what? Go to the stadium, cheer like crazy, see how they grow, because their best days are ahead of them.
Yeah. Okay, let's get to the tail of the tape. I used a boxing analogy earlier, so I might as well go to the tail of the tape. Here you can see what they've done. This is the Penn State offense against the defense. The key is the 385 yards. It's also the fact that it's not just the 21 points. It's the fact they've given up 35.7 per game in the conference.
9 straight games Penn State's been able to rush the ball for 200-plus yards. I think they're going to make it 10 against Indiana's defense. I think they're going to be able to control the line of scrimmage, and I think they would really like to control the line of scrimmage, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they would. Well, here's another part, too, though. They do have 14 takeaways this year as a defense. Penn State, conversely, only has 8 takeaways, and you would not have expected that number through 6 games.
Right. And I think the thing we're talking about in the film room a little bit about Indiana's defense is they do some very clever things scheme-wise to try and take away some of the things in the run game. So we'll see.
You're not reviewing True Grit?
No.
You told us in the meeting you were reviewing True Grit.
No, Caddyshack.
Oh, Caddyshack. We'll look at the Penn State defense after this. All right, welcome back. Now we'll turn it over to the defense, and we'll get right away to the Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships Defensive Player of the Week. Brought to you by our good friends at Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships. The Defensive Player of the Week, Garrett Taylor. Made a lot of big plays in this game for Penn State, and I think Todd is getting better every week.
No doubt. He made an interception, and he's been around the football. I know he missed an interception in this game, but he's been around it, and he's, last week against, or the prior game against Ohio State, put them in a good position to put some points on the board there. It is for the deflection and takes off immediately. So he's become one of those game breakers on defense, and he's around the football an awful lot.
Yeah, you know what? And he also dropped one. He'll be the first to tell you that. We know that Amani dropped one. He'll be the first to tell you that. But there are also 4 fumbles in this game for Michigan State. You get any one of the, there were 3 dropped interceptions, 4 fumbles. You get one of the 7, you win the game.
Yeah, most likely.
You get one of the 7, you win the game, where Michigan State handed you the opportunity.
I think the one thing we talk about Taylor, just to go back to Taylor for a minute, the thing that's impressed me is his hustle. I mean, the interception was not one of those things where he should have been on the play, but he was hustling the ball.
Yep.
Ball came up, made a play, looked pretty good carrying it too. He might want to give him a shot at tailback if somebody gets hurt. But you know, you're starting to see that from him, and he's really starting to jump out. And I thought, scheme-wise, I thought Brent Pry did a nice job helping the corners out with Felton Davis most of the game. They always had somebody in the area to help as well. And I thought they did a nice job for most of the game, and obviously they caught him in the one-on-one the one time.
Look, and good things happen when you run to the football. I mean,
Right,
you know, those balls did not bounce their way. They weren't able to get those takeaways, as you mentioned, Steve. But, you know, it's kind of lost on, we talked a lot about the offense. Look, tremendous growth, right, with the defense from the start of the season until now. And look, really, if the offense had come through with a couple plays, we're talking about a team that's probably ranked top 5. I know top 5 teams or top 10 teams have had a lot of trouble, but the defense is showing a lot of growth from start to finish. They are getting better and better.
And something that James Franklin talks about all the time, and let's face it, I mean, your dad talked about this all the time. Don't be the team that makes the mistakes. Let's get to the penalties. Penn State, first 2 games of the season, was #1 in the nation in fewest penalties. They only had 6 penalties against them in 2 games that were accepted. Well, they've had 30 in the last 4 games, 7.5 per game, and for James Franklin, that's unacceptable.
And then penalties. You know, they only had 3. We had 6. 6 for 41. And obviously the one on the goal line stand. Obviously, you know, the goal line stand was as good as it gets, and then, you know, we give it to them.
And in fact, when you look at it, those penalties, you know, on the goal line stand, you know, there's one on Cam Brown. Then there's one where, I don't care, we can rack up the tape all we want. If anybody can find it, okay, anybody can find it. The other 2 are legit calls. That was not a legit call, and that was a scoring drive, but it hurt Penn State.
It's not just the penalties, it's when the penalties came. And look, that was the kind of game it was on Saturday. Everything seemed to go, the little things, the big things just seemed to go against Penn State, and the momentum carried against them. But they've got to learn, you know, it's a young team, yes, but you still got to understand situations and not what not to do. That's going to cost your team.
I mean, there's no question. I mean, and all of those led to first downs.
Yeah,
those are all 3rd down penalties.
And they're all essentially turnovers. And when you look at it, you know, Penn State didn't necessarily turn the ball over, but penalties like that are turnovers. A fake punt is a turnover because you're not getting the ball.
Good point.
So, you know, you really had some hidden turnovers, hidden stolen possessions, and it helped Michigan State, and they capitalized on it.
All right, so let's take a look at the tail of the tape. The Penn State defense against the Indiana offense led by quarterback Peyton Ramsey. And you can see that, you know, running the ball okay, but this is where Ramsey's been better. 250 yards passing a game for him. And we'll talk about a little bit about it later, but I thought Tom Allen made a heck of a decision last year saying, you know what, that's the style I want to play, that's the guy I want to play, we'll just ride it out and see what happens. Now they're getting the fruits of it, I think.
Yeah, no question. He's playing like a much more confident player. He's making some plays in the run game as well. And you look at who they've beaten, you know, they beat a Virginia team that's turned out to be pretty dang good after beating Miami. So, you know, this is a team that's gotten to be where they're a solid team. You better come and bring your A game for them.
They've had a rough schedule. Had Michigan State, Ohio State already. They played Iowa. These are all ranked teams that they've had to face. And I think for a quarterback like Peyton Ramsey too, it's nice to know that you can make a mistake and you're still going to be put out there. I think that's very important for a coach to name that quarterback your guy, because then you can go out there and play with confidence. If you make a mistake, you just come right back out and try to learn from that particular one.
Indiana does not get a lot of big plays in the offense, but they'll move the ball with a lot of the crossing routes. And for Koa Farmer and the defense, they know that'll be one of the keys to defend.
To have zone coverage, we gotta be disciplined in our zone coverage. You know, we gotta be, you know, if I have to be 2x5 outside the hash, that's where I have to be. If that's where they want to throw the crossing route, that's where I have to be. You can't be influenced by other things and be zone disciplined, because the way Indiana runs those crossing routes is good, really good. They do a great job of that concept.
Yeah, the crossing routes are critical for them. They got big receivers. Hale's a big receiver. Westbrook's a big receiver. Harris is smaller in terms of stature, but he's a big play guy for them.
Well, I'll go to what Jay said about what Michigan State did against Penn State last week. I think Penn State really needs to tackle well. There's going to be a lot of short completions, a lot of guys trying to stretch for first down, so they got to get them off the field with good tackles. Don't miss that first one and wrap them up so they can't stretch to move the chains.
And the other thing, and again, we're going to talk about this in the film room, they get their backs involved in the pass game as well.
They do.
So again, that's another thing where your linebackers not only got to worry about where's the crossing route coming from, but where's the back going. So I mean, this is going to be a complex system that Penn State's going to defend, but I think they'll do it.
Well, coming up, going into the film room, Jay said maybe Caddyshack, and then he said, no, Steve, you are a tremendous slouch. We'll come back with the film room after this.
Welcome back to the Blue White Tailgate. We are in the film room. It's brought to you by Beer, Belly's Beverage. And Jay, I would love to see you break down some of the action in the end zone, in the field behind the end zones at Memorial Stadium.
Well,
the way it's all set up.
Yeah.
They got rid of it?
They
Oh,
got rid of the
that's a
kids'
shame.
field at Memorial Stadium, which ticks me off.
That's a shame because that was a lot of fun. We had this one football caught in a tree, all that good stuff, all that action and drama from years past. But Memorial Stadium, kind of a strange place to play. I'd say they've had success in that they've won the game at Memorial Stadium, but you got some stats here.
Well,
to
let's
tell
take
us
a look
they
at the
haven't
average
exactly
margin.
dominated.
Yeah, take a look at the average margin of victory at home when Penn State plays Indiana versus at Indiana. Big difference there, as you can see. In fact, at least this game's not at noon because that always has an extra factor of lulling them to sleep. But let's take a look at a little bit about their special teams and. They're one of the things I think where Penn State's going to have a major advantage is on the exchanges of kickoffs and punting. And you look at Indiana's 10th in the Big Ten in kickoff coverage, 13th in net punting. Penn State's going to get some plays at it. And one of the things we want to talk about is the kickoff coverage. Indiana, only 19 of their 38 kickoffs have been touchbacks. People have gotten big returns against them. One of the things you'll look at is take a look here against Michigan State. You're going to see when this guy catches the ball now, there's not an Indiana guy inside the 25-yard line. 27 is the closest. And take a look at the kickoff return that they get out of it, because that's going to be an important thing. If Indiana's going to hang the ball up there and not get down there, KJ Hamler's going to be able to make some big plays. There they actually get a guy in position to make the play, don't make the play. Iowa last week had 2 or 3 big ones against them as well. Now let's talk a little bit about what Indiana does offensively. And we talked about Peyton Ramsey a little bit earlier. And one of the things that they do a nice job with their crossing routes. We've talked about those. And they do a good job on that because they've got wideouts that are all not necessarily great players, but they get across. They make sure that when they get across and catch the ball, they get yards after. And this is kind of the way they look at it as part of their run game. So take a look at them from the video here. You're going to see them on these crossing routes. They get picks. They puts pressure on your linebackers. And again, it's a nice, easy throw. A guy, even my age, can still make that throw, but it's a gain of 10. It moves the chains. The other thing they do is they're very good with their quarterback run game. They put a lot of pressure on defensive ends and linebackers. They're going to fake the ball inside here, read this defensive end, and then bring a guy around to block the linebacker, and watch how Peyton Ramsey does this on the video. Nice fake. That defensive end bites. The pulling tight end from the back gets outside, and again, there's 10 or 12 yards. Again, not big plays, but plays that are good enough to move the chains. We talked about the running backs in the pass game. Here they're going to get them on a wheel route on a linebacker with that crossing route coming across. Penn State fans will remember Saquon Barkley had a lot of success with this route last year. In fact, he's doing some of that with the Giants. But take a look at how effective this is. Again, it gets a matchup on a linebacker. They run a crossing route, which creates some traffic for that linebacker. And again, not big plays, but 17 yards that move the chains. And the other thing we'll take a look at is their wide out screen. So again, a lot of different ways to get their quarterback short throws or runs to give them some confidence. Here, they bunch everybody in, they get the corner in, they just block him, throw it out here with a fake. Take a look at how effective that is. That fake holds the linebackers, throws out the wideout, they get a nice block out there on the corner. Again, 9 yards. That's a good play on first down or second and long.
And we saw how the Buckeyes hurt the Nittany Lions with the screen game, so that's something that they're going to want to counteract the pressure that Penn State brings. All right, defensively, you like some of the schemes that they draw up here.
Yeah, they do a nice job, and they're trying to create turnovers. And on their run-down blitzes we're going to talk about, they're trying to get you to 2nd and 10, 2nd and 11. If they can get Penn State in a lot of 3rd and longs, that's going to help them. So let's take a look at some of the things that they do. Again, we're talking some run-down stuff. Defensive line stunts, bringing 2 guys off the edge, which creates a stunt this way. So you're going to force everybody to cut back, and then they're going to drop this guy out. So if Penn State can get on rundowns, can get their running backs on these defensive ends dropping in the pass game, that's a major advantage for Penn State. They rotate the coverage, come down and play man. So let's take a look at that. Again, coming from the edge here, gives problems there. And again, it's 2nd and 7. That's a rundown. They end up, catching Michigan State in the pass.
Now, when they get to third downs, one of the things that I think we'll see from Indiana is they'll spy the quarterback. Ohio State did it, not very successfully against Trace McSorley. Michigan State had more, but again, they're going to spy the quarterback with this linebacker and also with this guy dropping out. So they'll give themselves some flexibility. So take a look at how they play their man-to-man with two guys high here. Again, if the quarterback, see those guys, they're hesitating, and they get to the quarterback because there's nowhere to go with the ball because they do a nice job in the secondary. And then again, one of the other things they'll do is they're going to give you some overload four-man side blitz. When you're a single-back team like Penn State, the four-man blitz to a side is a major, major problem. And they're going to bring four this side, drop this guy out into coverage. Trace is going to have to recognize those things, get the ball to the guy that the defensive end is covering, recognize what happens in the secondary. And he's a veteran guy. I think he'll do it. But again, he's going to have to throw hot when they do this. So take a look at this coming from that side. Again, you can't block them all. And if you hold on to that ball, you're looking for trouble. And again, those create turnovers, which keep them in the game.
Third down, hot blitzes, and spying of Trace McSorley. It was effective for Michigan State. They were only 3 of 14 converting third down conversions, and they got off the field an awful lot, Penn State's offense. They only had 3 drives of more than 5 plays all day long.
I think that's going to be critical for Penn State to get into where they can get those third downs and get into 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, and keep moving the chains and keep the ball away from Indiana.
All right, once again, we leave the film room a lot smarter, a lot more prepared for this matchup between the Hoosiers and the Nittany Lions. All right, that's your film room. We'll be right back on the Blue White Tailgate.
All right, welcome back. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind, and I've said this for about a month to other people. I said, Indiana's a lot better than people realize. That's a good football team. What do you guys think when you look at them?
I completely agree. Now, they've had a couple of tough outings. Iowa really got the better of them.
Yeah, they did.
And Iowa's style does not play, that's a tough matchup for Indiana because of the way they play. But Penn State's style offensively is what Indiana sees most every day in practice, so they're a little more comfortable with it. But they beat, as I mentioned earlier, they beat Virginia. Virginia's a good football team, and this is a team that can beat Penn State if we're not careful.
Well, I think so too, but I think when you want to catch Indiana is the second half of the season, because that's when things start to equal out. They start to hit the Big Ten schedule, and the roster depth shows up. With the Hoosiers, they don't have the kind of roster depth that most teams do.
Really good point.
And you get to the second half of the season. So when you see Indiana on the schedule and you're Virginia, you go, oh, crud, they're on the first half of their schedule. They're hitting their stride, but they're starting to get beat up. I mean, Iowa put up 42 on them right after Ohio State put 49, Michigan State earlier 35. So I don't think this is a team that can physically match up with Penn State's roster in the 7th game of the season. Their 8th game, they haven't had their bye week yet, but if you make mistakes, if you turn it over, as you mentioned the takeaways, it can be a dangerous place. It's awfully quiet in Bloomington. I'm glad it's a 3:30 kickoff, guys, and not that 11 a.m. local time kickoff where it's real sleepy in Indiana. So,
well, it was years ago when Bill Frieder took the Arizona State basketball job. The athletic director, Bo Schembechler, says, I want a Michigan man coaching Michigan. Indiana now has an Indiana man coaching Indiana. Indiana high school roots, that's Tom Allen. So let's take a look at what he's done. Yeah, it's his 2nd season. A lot of people really respect him defensively, and he knows his state because of the years he spent coaching high school in that state. I mean, I think, it's only a couple of years, but I think he's done a good job with them.
Oh, I think so too. I think this is a team that could win. They can steal another win or two and get themselves in the bowl, and that's a big step for them. And I think defensively, you look at the way they play, they're a better defensive team than they've been the last 7 or 8 years. They're not great, but their offensive line.
But that's his forte,
right?
defense.
No question. And you look at their offensive line; they're a different offensive line than they've had. They've got guys that can move the pile when they have to. So he's done a good job really improving this program.
As I said earlier, he picked his quarterback last year. He said, "Look, we're going to go with Peyton Ramsey. This is the style I want to play." Koa Farmer says defending a guy like that is not easy.
So it's tough when you got to play a quarterback, that can do the zone read. We got to watch the running back, and now we got to watch the quarterback because they're both the threats at the same play, kind of like Trace. But he has great linemen. He has great receivers that he throws the ball to, and they're a great football team.
Well, and I mean when you look at him, that's the key to go with So veteran receivers. I talked about Hale and Westbrook earlier. I mean, Luke Timian's a transfer from Oklahoma State. Ja'Shawn Harris.
I like what Tom Allen's doing with Indiana. I mean, you have certain things that you can do with the program and certain things you cannot. And he has identified a way, how do we compete in the Big Ten? You do it with ball control and offense. You do it with a dual threat quarterback that can move the chains, get some time of possession, and then you do it by playing good, solid, consistent defense, right? That's how you got to do it. I mean, imagine the Indianas, the Rutgers. Look at the schedule they got to play every single year, right? I mean, in the Big Ten East. And he's trying to identify a way to win the game and personnel to do so. Can't make quite as many mistakes when you're picking guys, right? You've got to be solid about who you pick and put on the roster. He's done a pretty good job in rebuilding this program.
There's no question about that. And the running back spot, Morgan Ellison, I mean, they've suspended him for 2.5 years for an off-the-field incident. I mean, not 2.5 games, 2.5 years. So Stevie Scott has stepped in at running back. They do throw to the backs, but they don't get a lot of yardage out of their backs when they throw to their backs, which is unusual. Michigan State's numbers when they throw to the backs were really good all season, not Indiana. Now let's get to the defensive side. James Franklin says, hey, they'll buckle the chin straps, they'll come after you.
They have a very specific plan against each formation and back alignment set on how they're going to stop what they think are the 2 or 3 things that you do the most, from a tendency standpoint. And it can be pretty different, watching them on tape. So that's always the challenge is, what is the defense of the week going to be?
And that's critical. The other part, too, is that they haven't had their bye week yet. I mean, I think they're playing their 8th consecutive game here. And that goes back to the really great point you made about Todd. I think their starters are really good. It's when they have to dip into the bench is when things start to go off the rails.
Defensive line-wise, they're not a team that puts a tremendous amount of pressure on you, too. And, so we get a list of the guys we want to talk about for Indiana, and I see, a couple linebackers, a couple defensive backs. Not a lot of defensive linemen. There's nobody named Bosa at the end of this playing for Indiana. And to me, this is a game where Penn State's offensive line can go in there and they're supposed to be built to just finish a game like this, to just control a game like this. Now the linebackers are good. Raekwon Jones, Jonathan, they got some big defensive backs that can cover, that can hit.
Crawford's got 9 career picks.
Right, but you want them hitting your running backs and Miles Sanders, Ricky Slade, whoever, 6-7 yards down the field. And so that's when you want to be introducing yourself to the linebackers and the defensive backs.
Because in Big Ten play, the numbers against that defense have gone up. 35.7 points a game in Big Ten play. That is a big difference.
Yeah, no question. And obviously they're playing better teams in the Big Ten. But I think one of the things that Allen has done with their defense is they know they don't have the defensive linemen, they don't have the depth, but they're going to scheme some things. And against Iowa, they missed a couple of tackles that would have been sacks. One led to a touchdown. So, that's the frustrating thing for them. But, they do some nice things scheme-wise that Penn State's going to have to prepare for.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question. And they have to do that because that's their way of staying in games. And coaching staffs have to come up, especially early in their tenure, they have to come up with innovative ways to keep their teams in games. He's done that.
Yep.
I give him a lot of credit for that. Coming up, Gerry DiNardo talks with Josh Sperber. Later, the good, the bad, and the ugly, which we're good at.
Welcome back to Blue White Tailgate, and right now we have Shop Talk presented by Ace Hardware of State College. Right now I'm talking with Gerry DiNardo, analyst for the Big Ten Network. Gerry, how are you today?
Well, thanks for having me, Josh. Appreciate it.
Gerry, you came back from the Big Ten tailgate in Happy Valley. It was a tough loss for Penn State. What are your thoughts on Penn State's performance against Michigan State last week?
There's a lot of different things that go on during the game. My biggest takeaway from Penn State was that the offensive line lost to the Michigan State defensive line. And I think James has done a really good job developing that offensive line. I think Bill O'Brien took the first steps, and James has followed up on it because at the end of Joe's tenure, it was dipping down, but it's not really where it needs to be. And I thought that the Michigan State D-line just, played out of sight, maybe their best game. So that, to me, that was the biggest takeaway, negative takeaway from the Penn State perspective.
Yeah, definitely Michigan State's best game of the season. And, you talked about that offensive line, which came into the year ranked as one of the tops in the Big Ten, maybe even college football. Has that really lived up to its expectations so far?
Well, that's not a fair ranking, in my opinion. In fact, I'm on the Joe Moore Award Committee, and we had a big conference call Sunday night, and I hear all these offensive line experts. But my perspective on the offensive line is that it's probably the best that I've seen since the Big Ten started. At best, you could rate them 3 or 4 in the Big Ten going into the season. I thought Wisconsin and Ohio State were the best. And I think if they were legitimately third in the Big Ten Conference as an offensive line, that's significant improvement. But to say that they're one of the best in the country is absolutely overrating them. And again, I don't want to be negative. I mean, I think James and Bill did a really good job getting them to this point. Are they one of the best in the country? No. Is one of the differences between Penn State being one of the best programs in the country, and I'm not saying it's not already, but one of the places that they have to get better is the offensive line. That doesn't mean they haven't improved. I just think they have a lot of room for growth.
Well, you're talking about that room for growth. That was a big theme of the press conference after the Ohio State game. Coach Franklin talked a lot about the difference between great and elite programs. How far is Penn State on the road from being a great program into being an elite one?
Well, I think they're close. You know, I think anytime the coach takes over a historic power, a program that has a footprint in college football history, which is Penn State, and wins their conference in the third year, that's a high bar. I applaud James for going down this elite and great trail. I knew there were landmines in that trail. Like the next game you lost, you know, the Michigan fans and the Michigan State fans and all the fans are going to say, elite, they lost to a Michigan State team. They've lost 2 in a row. But you know what? If that's his approach, if that's his pitch, have at it. Don't worry about when what you said isn't going to look good. And I respect that wholeheartedly. I'm not even sure, Josh, how to define an elite program. I mean, to me, that's the issue. Penn State has all the resources necessary to compete for a championship year in and year out, meaning a Big Ten, an East, a Big Ten, and a national championship. But how many national championships do you have to win to be elite? I don't know the answer to that. How many Big Ten championships do you have to win to be elite? Some people say an elite program is when several coaches in succession have won championships. So when you can define elite, then I think we can apply it to Penn State. But I haven't heard anybody come up with a really good definition.
It's definitely a good point. And Coach Franklin said that Ohio State was an elite program. Part of that was because they came back from about 2 touchdowns down with 8 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. Talk to me about how that loss combined with this Michigan State loss. You know, what does that do for Penn State's road in the Big Ten and even beyond this season?
Well, there's no doubt it sets them back. 2 losses in the East, and they lost to Michigan State and Ohio State, which means if they have 2 losses, they lose the tiebreaker. So, you know, the likelihood of them winning the East is not very good. It's a setback. It's a temporary setback. This program is the best it's been, in my opinion, since I've been covering it, and that's since the beginning of the Big Ten Network. So that's 11 to 12 years. I spent 3 years at Indiana, so make it 15 years if you want to round up a little bit. It's in better shape than it's ever been. Sandy Barber, the athletic director, has done an unbelievable job, not only for football, for other sports. I mean, you know, amongst these 2 losses, I mean, my opinion, Penn State's rocking and rolling in probably all of athletics, and they're certainly in the conversation with football. For us to think that a place like Penn State can't lose 2 in a row in the Big Ten East, in the Big Ten East, there's a lot of teams in the country that could lose 2 in a row.
Yeah, and it's certainly a tough division. They still have another game this week against Indiana. Any quick thoughts on how that matchup's going to play out?
No, not really. I mean, Penn State has better players. Indiana struggles against the best teams in the East. You know, it's tough to be Indiana ever since the conference was divided geographically instead of by competitive balance. So Indiana's always going to struggle to catch Michigan State, Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State. Just the way it is. And this Saturday will be a continuation of that historic struggle.
It certainly is. We've got a good one coming up. Gerry, thank you so much for coming on our show this week. Guys, we'll be back with more Blue White Tailgate after this.
All right, so we come right out of the blocks with the good, the bad, get my timing here, the ugly. Jay, you get the good.
Okay, this is going to sound very strange, but I'm going to say the good is LSU getting fined $100,000 for storming the field. And look, I love the celebration. I love the spontaneity of it.
Yep.
But let the other team get their people off the field. I've been on one of those fields trying to get off the field after a loss like that, and people are running at you. It's one of those things could turn into something really ugly. So let them get off the field and then go.
You know, it's interesting because Mike Krzyzewski brought that up a couple of years ago about Duke. Because, look, the Duke's the biggest game in everybody's schedule. So if you then beat them.
That's worth $100,000 if you beat them.
Yeah,
you take the fine.
But he also talked about, hey, look, my players need to get out of there. You know, they can't be there. I get the bad. And the bad is storming the field. No, I'm just kidding. The bad is for me, Nick Bosa decided he's going to forego his eligibility. He's leaving Ohio State. He wants to get ready for the draft. You know, college football has become big business. All right? Should we be surprised when the players treat it like big business?
No, we shouldn't be.
No.
We shouldn't be. The ugly. Boy, the honeymoon was over quickly for Scott Frost at Nebraska. 0-6, the worst start in their storied history. Lost to Northwestern. A Spring Grove kid, Drew Luckenbaugh, hit the game-winning overtime kick, won Special Teams Player of the Week. And then he blamed the defensive coach. Jay, you mentioned it, right? He was asked
So
how
he
we
didn't
gave
call
up
the
10 points late. He
defenses.
goes, I don't call the defenses. Whew, threw the D coordinator under the bus. It's gotten ugly in Lincoln.
In fact, the wheels of the bus back up as well.
Yeah.
Back, forth,
Yes.
back and forth. All right, let's get to our picks. Time now for the picks. Oregon and Washington State on the Palouse. You get that one, Jay.
You know, game day has finally come to Washington State. Every week somebody has a Washington State flag. I've actually met one of the guys that had it.
Yeah.
It's a thing. But you know what? Washington State has thrown for 413 yards a game. They've been very, very good throwing the football. I think they're going to give Oregon all kinds of fits, but I think Oregon's balance is going to get them over the top.
Well, Josh, Joe Moorhead takes Mississippi State into Baton Rouge to take on LSU. What do you think?
LSU has had one of the toughest schedules in college football so far this season and have managed to escape with just one road loss. Their last game, a 20-point victory against the number 2 ranked Georgia Bulldogs at home. They're back in Death Valley against Mississippi State. I expect another victory for the Tigers. Now Steve has an ACC matchup to pick.
Yeah, my ACC matchup, Josh, happens to be NC State Clemson. The game's in Death Valley. I think that plays a role. NC State's only lost one time all year. They're actually a pretty good team. I think Clemson just has more depth. Clemson's going to win. You get Michigan State, Todd.
Yeah, the only 2 ranked teams, by the way, in the ACC, those 2 matchups. Michigan at Michigan State. Jim Harbaugh's got the program rolling. I don't know if Coach D'Antonio can pull off 2 huge wins in a row of top 10 teams. I think the Wolverines are running good. They're looking good. Shea Patterson's got the offense going well, and that defense is tough. It's a weird series, but I'm going to go with the Wolverines in this one.
Okay, let's get to the keys to the game now. Keys to the game here brought to you by our good friends at Aaron's. It's a road game, so Todd and Jay said they're going to be taking the furniture over to
Bloomington.
just so they can watch. So, what do you think of the keys, Todd?
I mentioned it before. I'm going to go with it again. I think it's the offensive line. I think the offensive line for Penn State can take control of this game early and often, and I think they need to dominate the line of scrimmage and get them ahead in this game. And I think it's the offensive line that can win it.
See, and that's that last part. I know how it's played out for Penn State. Okay, I know how it is. I'm still a big believer in playing with the lead. I'd rather be in that spot than trying to come from behind. And I think on the road especially, I think you got to do that. Now the question is, can you make it pay off, Jay?
I think the key for Penn State is going to be Indiana's going to come at them with some early blitzes on early downs to get them off schedule and try and create some turnovers. And if you give them some turnovers, you encourage them, you're in a ball game and anything can happen, especially late as the game goes. So I think hold on to the football, deal with that blitz scheme, and I think they'll be fine.
It's going to be a 3:30 kick coming up on Saturday in Bloomington. And don't forget, next week, for your planning purposes, the Penn State-Iowa game at Beaver Stadium will also be a 3:30 kickoff. It's very nice of them to give us a 12-day window. Yes. All right. For Jay, Todd, Steve, thanks for joining us.